because the bridging equipment, yeah, I guess you'd call it boats, and the boats and stuff that were needed didn't show up. So the soldiers, I guess, were pulled. Patton was ticked off because he didn't have a crossing to show. The soldiers, I guess, were pulled back because some of the German observation points could see them, and they were subject to fire. And I think the next day, the bridging attempt was repeated, and there was enough equipment by that time that they were able to succeed. And the reason I brought this up is this friend of mine thought that Patton was really ticked off because he couldn't show the newsmen the crossing, and that may have been one aspect of it, but I'm convinced in my own mind that Patton was really ticked off because he believed in movement, and the faster we got across the river, the smaller the chance the Germans would have of being able to put up a good defense. And I'm pretty convinced that's the truth. So he lost a day. But the Germans were so screwed up at that time, partly because they had lost a bunch of troops, and I think they probably hadn't had a chance to organize their defenses very well because it had only been a couple of days. Anyhow, we got across okay, and there was difficult fighting, but the bridgeheads remained and were expanded, and this was, by the time the last of this happened, was maybe the 25th or 26th of February, and within 3 weeks, the division had advanced through the main Siegfried line and broken out. And so I actually got to the Rhine River about the 22nd of March. I was in a forward observer crew, and we were kind of ahead of everybody. But so there was 2 months of very hard fighting from the middle of January to the middle of March, and then that was the war. We went up, we got pulled out, withdrew somewhere close to Kaiserslautern, I would guess latter part of April. And my battalion was in a town about 40 miles southeast of Dusseldorf, and we were about, I think we were out about as far as anyone in the division in that direction from division headquarters, which was in Dusseldorf. And there we were pulling guard duty. We had a lot of displaced persons from all over Europe that the Germans had. And one of the first things that happened was that all the people from Western Europe who had been confined in the German displaced person camp in our town, and I'm sure through the whole division area, were sent home. But there were a lot of Russians there. I'm sure there were probably Czechs and from all over Central. I don't know exactly. I know what happened to the Russians, so I'll take care of that first. Early in June, before we left that area and before the British took over, all the Russians were sent home, and they were not a very happy bunch of troops because they all expected to be killed, because apparently Stalin, I don't know whether people below him or not, believed that anyone who had been in the West was been contaminated and was an enemy, and so they weren't going to be allowed to mingle with the rest of Russian society. And to say, I don't know what happened to the people who lived between Russia and Germany. They may have had to wait a while before, well, if they were Czechs, the Russians hadn't, well, I'm going to tell I was going to say the Russians hadn't cleared Czechoslovakia out, but that's not true, because by the 9th of May they had already gotten to Prague. So, and if the American army could have had the ability to move those people, they would have been probably returned home about the same time as the Russians. But I didn't have any direct experience, so I don't know exactly what happened. But I know there were people from all over Europe in just one little camp in our town, maybe 1,000 people. I remember some French laborers there went home in the first few days. They were not in very good physical condition. I don't know how many calories the Germans gave them as laborers, but I know that they weren't too great in their treatment of people. So that was the first job, getting everybody home.
And what was the frame of mind in your unit at that point when you first saw and then set foot on German soil after what you'd been through?
I don't know, but I don't think anybody in our outfit, and it's probably true of the division as a whole, was too friendly inclined towards the Germans. I think the only Germans who had a chance of getting friendly thoughts from the American Army were the kids who were trying to get food also for their families in Germany. And I think, my guess is that German kids who came around to our mess halls after a meal probably got what food was left, but it's a guess. Mainly it's a guess because I don't think the Army had a policy that they were going to destroy the food rather than get it to the people. So the Germans had some benefit from American food, but I never saw. And well, there was a non-fraternization policy which the Army had, so it was not very smart to get caught being friendly to a German anyhow.
And what was the sense among you and your fellow soldiers in the unit now that you were fighting in Germany and the end was in sight, so to speak? Was that
I think I felt that the Germans had gotten what was coming to them, and I think it was partly because, rightly or wrongly, I figured a majority of the Germans had supported Hitler, or he probably wouldn't have gotten into power. So, when you met people, they had not been Nazis or anything else, and that was kind of a standard answer. Some of it may have been true, but there had to have been a lot of those people who were Nazi sympathizers, if not members of the party. And so there wasn't any, I don't think there was really a friendly feeling towards the Germans. I don't even know how sorry we were, but this was the first war that the German people really got a taste of what had happened to everybody else, because First World War never got into Germany, and I expect the Franco-Prussian War was in. So the German people were always on the winning side, and I think it might have ruined their perspective in the sense that if you're the winner instead of the loser, things are a hell of a lot better.
That's for sure. And when you got to Czechoslovakia, then you were actually very close to, I think, the demarcation line between the...
Well, the division was on it, but I wasn't. Maybe our battalion was lucky, maybe because we were artillery instead of infantry, we were lucky. But I have a bunch of friends now who are in the infantry, and a number of them had been right up against the demarcation line, and I think the main job was to make sure the Russian troops stayed on their side of the line, because some of them were scavenging onto the American side for food, and maybe some of them were scavenging for women also, I don't know. But the Russian troops that were up against us